I've been trying to make Kuraz and Black Garden work in Edison format, and this is one of the best ways I found to utilize them. Let's jump into it. Starting with the main deck, I have 3 copies of Titanial, Princess of Camellias. This plant deck plays very similar to Amaryllis in that Titanial is pretty much the heart and soul of the deck. You want to play trade-in so you can discard the Amaryllises and dig deeper into your deck. And even drawing the Titanial is not too bad because you play trade-in, discard the traps to get her out of your hand so then you can reborn her. You can tribute summon and even normal summon the Titanial thanks to a card in our side deck. And there's a very cool interaction where if you have a Titanial in your grave, your opponent has a Titanial on their field, and maybe even some Dandelion tokens, you can use Black Garden's effect to destroy their Titanial and summon your own. Then I have 3 copies of Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis. Amaryllis is still a very strong card in Edison format, and just having the everlasting recurring body which you can tribute for Kuraz comes up in a pinch. 2 copies of Lonefire Blossom. Lonefire tutors any plant from your deck. It is pretty much a must-have in any plant deck in Edison format, as well as the 2 copies of Dandelion. Whilst the tokens don't really contribute anything to our board, they're very good with Kuraz or with Cyber Valley. You also want to make sure to have some amount of plants so you can actually banish them for Amaryllis in the end phase. And the tokens can also help you wall up and keep your life points safe, unless they have a Bora. And for the last plant in the main deck, I have 1 copy of Botanical Lion. Normally I would play a Graveros in its spot, as I believe that card is actually very good in this format and in the Amaryllis deck in general. But Botanical Lion has 1600 attack points, meaning that if you have a Black Garden and it has summoned 2 tokens, those tokens would equal to 1600 attack points. So you could pop them both to summon back the Lion from your graveyard. Additionally, since I'm playing Black Garden and Kuraz, I had to make some other concessions in my deck building, to where the Graveros doesn't actually have as many targets to send. There's no Plague Spirit Zombie in this deck, and I didn't really want to side in a bunch of searchable non-engine pieces that I could send that are beneficial, such as a Necro Garden or a Shiny Black Sea in any given matchup. But I still wanted to have the 11th plant. In my experience, having just 10 and something like Dandelion or Cluster, which aren't ideal summons or can't even be summoned with Miracle Fertilizer, it just evens out the odds a bit in your deck by having an additional plant, which is a good summon off of Miracle Fertilizer, and in some hands where you mark to banish a plant and take their guy, and then maybe you DDR back the plant you banished, the Botanical Lion is usually better there than the Graveros because they're both 19 thanks to this effect, or even more should you pitch a Dandelion, for example. And it wouldn't require you to reveal a plant in the end phase. So yeah, that is it for the plants that I have in this deck. It's 11 in total. Then I have the aforementioned Kuraz Light Monarch, to which I play 2 copies of. What I like about Kuraz in this deck is that it just works with so many of your cards. There's a lot of ways where you can summon monsters in your opponent's turn, or your end phase, with the plants. You have plenty of cards that you don't mind popping with its effect, such as Amaryllis or Dandelion tokens, various spells that may be dead, or you just don't want to play in the given situation. Or if you have something to tribute over, you could also use Mark of the Rose, take their guy, attack with it, and then pop the mark and the monster with Kuraz, thus actually dealing with the monster instead of having to valley it away, for example. And obviously I am playing Cyber Valley in this deck, as Cyber Valley is the best monster you can play in Amaryllis. It just fixes all the issues of the deck and just blends so well with Mark of the Rose, GDR, Return. So if you haven't picked these up, make sure to do so, as it is a staple in Edison format. If you valley away your Kuraz and you DDR back the Kuraz, you can use the Kuraz to pop the DDR and itself and just draw 2 cards. And if you ever played Amaryllis before, you know how good drawing cards in this deck is. But a problem with the Kuraz is that it sometimes is dead. You can draw this card at inopportune times, you can be in a position where your opponent has a lead on you and you don't have enough monsters to tribute to even summon this, let alone popping your other cards and hoping to draw something which you can use to contest the board. A lot of the time when you summon Kuraz, you kinda just pass, because Kuraz itself can attack, and it requires a normal summon, in most situations, to where you can't use something like Lonefire or Miracle Fertilizer. As such, you have to make certain concessions in your deck building when you want to include Kuraz Light Monarch, but you also can't really build completely around this card, because Kuraz on its own doesn't actually win the game. That's what I noticed with a lot of these Kuraz based decks, where the entire deck functions around Kuraz popping your own cards like a Gear Town. But then when you don't draw Gear Town, Kuraz sucks. And when you don't draw Kuraz, the Gear Town sucks. Even if you go Gear Town, set a field spell, summon Ancient Gigagiltron Dragon. If that's all you're doing, it's not enough. Summoning a blue eye is not gonna win you the game. But seeing Kuraz as a supplementary engine or something that you can add into your deck that's already good, such as Cyber Valley, just a card that works with other cards in your deck, but isn't the sole purpose of the deck, I think is very good. But you cannot play Kuraz in something like Blackwing or Via Turbo, because it just doesn't work with that deck. But in this version of Plants, I found it to be pretty good. For the other monsters, I have the 3 copies of Cyber Valley. We don't need to go super in depth about why this card is good in Amaryllis, it's already been covered plenty. But with the inclusion of Kuraz and Black Garden, it becomes even better. If you go Black Garden turn 1 and pass, your opponent may be inclined to just pass back. And if you can buy turns in a hand that might be slower in this deck, and if they do, you're doing exactly what you want to with Black Garden. This card wants to buy you more turns. If this card says your opponent doesn't play, that is very good in the hands where you can't do much on turn 1, or maybe turn 2. Some hands in this deck just requires more setup, because you perhaps drew too many copies of Titanial or Amaryllis, so your hand is actually 3-4 cards, not 6. But if your 8th card is a trade-in, that might draw you into other cards that can help facilitate your hand and actually get your game plan going. Additionally, if they were to play under your Black Garden, their monsters are halved, and you get a token with 800 attack points, so there's a high chance that they can't do much damage to you. And if Via Turbo summons something like Armageddon Knight to perhaps set up a play for next turn, and you get a token that's bigger than the Geddon, well then you can just valley away the token. As such, the Black Garden can work in such a way where it makes your valley even better, which is all the more reasons to play Cyber Valley in Amaryllis. For the last monster, I have 1 copy of Card Trooper. Trooper is just a good card to get you out of the early game. By milling cards, you set up for your graveyard interactions such as Amaryllis, Miracle Fertilizer, Hidden Armory into Mark of the Rose should you have the DDR already. Pairing both of those, you basically get a monster reborn and take their guy. It's also one of those cards that kinda demands an answer, because the longer a Card Trooper goes uncontested, the further you get to mill into your deck, and when you hit Amaryllis and you can summon that back, they are forced to act. And with this deck, you kinda want your opponent to play, because then that turns on your cards like Mark of the Rose, and when you summon Titanial and beat over something, you get a +1 by killing their monster in battle. And Card Troop is one of those few cards in Edison format that actually forces your opponent to act in these stalemates. But that's it for the monsters. For the spells, I have 3 copies of Trade-In. This card can sometimes be dead, because you only have 6 level 8s in the main deck, but thanks to Kuraz, and even like DDR and Regeki Break, to where you can pitch it and get some value off of it, popping this card with Kuraz is really good. Or just Kuraz drawing you into this to pair with your level 8, or vice versa. 3 copies of Miracle Fertilizer. This is just a once per turn monster reborn for plants, which is absolutely insane. 3 copies of Hidden Armory. I've seen some people not play this in Amaryllis Valley, and I think that's incorrect. With Hidden Armory, you mill a card, which is good in Amaryllis, and you get to tutor for either your DDR or your Mark of the Rose, which is what you build your deck around. This card is what makes Valley good, and this card is partially the reason why we play Amaryllis, so we can banish our Titanial and bring her back. Additionally, these cards work in tandem with one another. If you go Mark and banish a Titanial, and you DDR it back, that is a way similar to Miracle Fertilizer, where you can just monster reborn back Titanial. Additionally, there are some nifty ways where you Mark take something and get value out of it with Cyber Valley or Kuraz. And the Cyber Valley also just sets up DDR. There are situations where I go Cyber Valley turn 1, they swing into it, and then next turn I can play DDR and pitch a Dandelion that was just dead in my hand and get a pot of greed in return. Then if you draw into something like Hidden Armory, you can Hidden Armory into DDR and do it all over again. And something that this deck is actually really good at is playing into a board. In some decks, it doesn't really make sense to value banish your own resources to draw 2, because the cards you are drawing aren't contesting their board. You're drawing cards like Bottomless Trap Hole. So you go and like valley banish your boss monster and draw a normal summon and a trap. That's not really what you want to do. But when you valley and you draw Miracle Fertilizer, you draw DDR into Titanial, you get a 2800 boss monster that can just attack over what they have. So I think a lot of players just have the wrong outlook on Cyber Valley because they don't play it in combo decks. Combo decks are the best decks for Cyber Valley because they naturally can break apart the board and struggle in the early game to where the Valley is really good. Similar to how Upstart Goblin is usually better in combo decks like Mermail, as opposed to control decks in Hat format for example. That's it for the plant-based spells. Then I'm playing 2 copies of Black Garden. There is no terraforming in the main deck, cause I didn't want to do 1 Terra and 1 Black Garden. Although it would be better with my side deck patterns, I don't want to like melee Black Garden and then the Terra is dead, or draw both and then the Terra is dead. I also didn't want to play 3 copies of Black Garden in 1 Terraforming and 2 Garden, or 4 to 5 field spells, where I could play 2 Terraforming, 1 field spell, and 1 or 2 Black Garden. So that is why I settle on just 2 copies of Black Garden, which I think is perfectly fine. It's not really a card that you want to build around completely, because again, it doesn't do too much into a board, but the Amaryllis deck is also very good into a board, so it's fine for you to play some cards that are dead when they have an established field. Because if you're able to summon Titanial, kill their guy, main phase 2 play Black Garden, it's very difficult for them to come back. Because if they start playing, maybe they make a Cataster, that's probably 2 or 3 tokens that you'll get to your field. And well, if they don't play, you're fine with that too. 1 copy of 1 for 1. Similar to how a Vayu Turbo deck feels very strong because you can play Dark Arm Dragon, Return, Burial, and Chaos Orc. These 1-offs which may feel inconsequential because they're just a 1-off, you're never gonna draw them, right? But when you do draw them, especially at the opportune time, they can just win you the game on their own. There are plenty of times I've gone turn 1, 1 for 1 pitch Dandy, summon Valley, get 2 tokens and draw 2 cards. But then I have 1 token left, so if I draw into DDR or Hidden Armory, or even another copy of Valley because I haven't normal summoned yet, I get to again draw 2 cards. And seeing the top 10 or 11 cards for your deck turn 1 is just something that most decks can't do. This is a big selling point of the Amaryllis deck. The deck is very fast, unlike other decks in Edison format. But it also has high longevity in that it has many ways to just Monster Reborn back a 2800 beat stick with a negation effect. Or ways to win in the late game with Amaryllis Burn. So don't underestimate 1 for 1, despite it seeming like a neg 1 at first glance. 1 Foolish Burial. Similarly with Foolish, sometimes this card just doesn't do anything at all. But on those turns when you pair Foolish with Kuraz or Cyber Valley, it can be really strong. It also just turns on cards like Miracle Fertilizer by dumping a plant into the graveyard. And also some decks just struggle with an Amaryllis coming back every single turn, which makes Foolish good into both the fast and slow decks in this format. And the last spell is 1 copy of Heavy Storm. No MST, I don't think that card is particularly needed in game 1. For the traps, 3 copies of Raigeki Break. I prefer Raigeki Break in this deck as opposed to Wing Blast. It is fairly rare that you want to Raigeki Break your own monsters, but being able to do so on an Amaryllis actually does come up. And whilst you can sometimes spin back a Royal Oppression with Wing Blast, it is usually just better to get it out of the way, which I think makes Raigeki Break a safer pick than Phoenix Wing Blast, or Karma Cut. 1 Torrential Tribute and 1 Mirror Force, 1 Trap Dust Shoot and 1 Return from the Different Dimension. That is it for the main deck, it's 40 cards. For the extra deck, I have 1 copy of Armory Arm, 1 Magical Android, 1 Ally of Justice Cataster, 1 Bryanak Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 1 Goyo Guardian, 1 Ancient Fairy Dragon, 1 Black Rose Dragon, 1 Darkened Dragon, 1 Thought Ruler Archfiend, 1 Colossal Fighter, 1 Stardust Dragon, 1 Mistworm, and 3 copies of Chimeretic Fortress Dragon. I'm playing 3 copies of Chimeretic because I'm siding Cyber Dragon, and there's no tuner in the main deck. So unless you steal 1 with Mark of the Rose, or Brain Control in the side, you can't make the synchros. But that's it for the extra deck. For the side deck, I have 2 copies of DD Crow, 2 copies of Lila Lightsworn Sorceress. I'm side decking the Lila against some of the slower decks where you're pretty fine to just summon Lila, pop a back row, go to end phase and mill 3 cards, hopefully getting some of your names in the graveyard. And even if they run over the Lila, they can't really punish you because there's no Shura in their deck. Meaning that I only side this card in against the slower decks. I had a game on TB where I played against my version of Gravekeepers, and against that deck I think Lila is really good. Because you summon Lila and you pop their Necro Valley, which is very troublesome for you. And if they kill the Lila, it's fine. It's a slow matchup. You trade it with their field spell, which is a floodgate to you, and then you milled 3 cards in the end phase. You didn't even take any damage. It's only really bad if they can kill this and an Air Balloon hit you directly. But there's a matchup where I would rather have this card than something like Dust Tornado, because it's also a body. And again, in the slower matchups, you don't mind drawing multiple normal summons, because the game can drag on for so long. and you're usually also okay with your push taking one turn longer because you have to normal summon. And I prefer to have Lila as opposed to Breaker the Magical Warrior in that situation, because Lila also mills free. So you can go turn 1, summon Lila, if you just want to mill free cards and get to the end phase. Again, kind of forcing them to act to where your mark into Cyber Valley play may be better, or just Titanial ran over what they have. Because Lila, similar to Trooper, if they don't contest it, you get to mill free again. And they can't set something like Deep Prison into Lila and protect your life. They actually have to run this over. But not in the main deck, because I don't really want this card against Vayu Turbo, Frogs, or Blackwing. 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon is particularly good because of Cyber Valley. For example, against Machina, you can summon Cyber Dragon, fuse away their board, swing for 2k and then Valley it away. It, again, similar to Lila, is just a good card to side into some of these slower decks, because the 2100 attack point is actually pretty good, and they might set in floodgates against you, so just having a 2100 beat stick to kill cards like Kaiku is really nice. Then for a bit more innovative inclusion, I actually have a Light and Darkness engine, I suppose you could call it, of 1 Light and Darkness Dragon, 1 Terraforming, and 1 Mausoleum of the Emperor. This is something I side into decks like Vayu Turbo, or other Royal Oppression decks, or just slow decks in general, which can't really deal with a Lad turn 1. Lad is also level 8, so if you have trade-in and discard and it's dead, you can just pitch it. You have plenty of ways to get 2 monsters on the field, in form of Dandelion, Amaryllis, and whatnot, so you can just tribute summon a Lad should you need to. Or if you open Lad with Mausoleum or Terraforming, you can pay 2k and summon it for free. Mausoleum also helps unbrick the hands with Titanial or Amaryllis, and can even be used with Kuraz. This is something I consider main decking, but I really like the idea of having these cards post-side, where my opponent may take out some cards that are worse against Amaryllis, which are good into Lad. For example, Dimensional Prison. If they have Dimensional Prison and anything that they can chain to it, they may take out those cards against this type of deck, in favor of other cards that are really good into Titanial but bad into Lad. For example, Smashing Ground or DD Crow to hit Amaryllis. Those cards do little to nothing against Lad. Lad does not care about those cards while he's on the field. Also, if the Lad dies and you get to bring back Titanial, that is pretty ridiculous. I had 2 Lad at some point, but I felt it was still fine to just play the 1, because it's not like Mausoleum and Terraforming are just for Lad. They're also good with Kuraz, Amaryllis, and Titanial, like I mentioned. But the Lad is just 1 more card to tie it all together, because I felt I wanted something else to use with the Mausoleum. So yeah, I really like this smokescreeny type of side in this deck. 1 copy of Mystical Space Typhoon, 1 Brain Control. This deck already has 4 copies of Brain Control in Mark of the Rose and Hidden Armory in the main deck, and the Brain Control is also not good in every single matchup. I do like this card a lot when you go second, because you can pair it with Cyber Valley and immediately take their monster, should they have a monster turn 1. And also against some matchups where you really want to remove the threat that they have, be it a Fossil Dyna or a Vanity's Fiend. Whilst in game 1 it might not be as good. Also depends on the matchup, of course. 2 copies of Royal Decree. Titanial Decree is a very good combo, and if you can flip this card against your opponent's trap deck, it is fine if your return from a different dimension may be dead. You don't need to side out all traps to put this card in. It is okay if you have some traps in your deck that are dead. Worst case, you can pop them with Kuraz, pitch them with DDR, or at any given point where they out your Royal Decree. And even when you draw Decree with some traps, if it's something like Return, and you have Heavy Storm, for example, or a Kuraz, to where you can pop your own Decree, you can do so, and then you can play your Return and go for game. And the last 2 cards on the side are 2 copies of Skill Drain. Skill Drain with Amaryllis and Titanial is really good, and there are some decks that just kinda lose to this card. But this is not something that I would side into Vayu Turbo or Blackwing in this deck, for example. In those matchups, I think the Decree is way better. And that is it for the deck profile. I do have 1 more deck with Kuraz and Black Garden that I've been tinkering around with, and I think it may even be better than this deck, at least as a Kuraz deck. Will this be the next best way to play Amaryllis? Maybe not, but I think it's a pretty fun deck to play around with, and it definitely has some considerations for your own deck, irregardless of how much you want to lean into the Kuraz Black Garden aspect or not. This Mausoleum Lad engine is actually something that's really good post-side to help you hedge against Royal Oppression or Deck Devastation Virus. But let me know if you guys want to see my other deck, where I try to play Black Garden in a competitive way. These cards are very fun to play around with, and can be quite powerful at times. But that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of your day. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below. There I'll be posting more personalized and exclusive content.